Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's D-Zone webinar with hydraulics. I'm Max Crampton Thomas, and I'll be your host for today's session. Before we get started, just a quick bit of housekeeping. Today's session is being recorded, and we'll send the on-demand recording after the event. We would also love to hear from the audience today, so if you have any questions during the presentation, please submit them using the Q&A panel, and we'll address as many as we can during the Q&A portion at the end. Finally, we have a poll question for the audience, so be sure to check out the polls tab as we get started. Today, we'll walk through the findings from the newly released report, 2026 AI Bots, Risk, Readiness, and Governance, based on a global survey of 300 enterprise IT and security leaders. We'll look at where enterprise bot readiness stands today, why traditional log management approaches can struggle at bot scale, and what teams can do to move from reactive detection towards stronger operational control. For you watching, this session will offer a clearer view into the gap between detection confidence and actual readiness, how AI-driven bots are changing the scale and speed of familiar threats, and what log infrastructure changes can make bot activity easier to understand, manage, and govern at internet scale. Attendees will also receive access to the companion D-Zone ref card on log management, updated with hydraulics to reflect modern architectures built for high-volume, high-traffic environments. Now, I'm pleased to turn things over to our speakers from Hydraulics, Srini Kadamati, Senior Product Manager, and Catherine Johnson, VP of Solutions Engineering. Srini and Catherine, could each of you tell us a little bit about your background and your work at Hydraulics?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Srini, and I'm one of the product managers here at Hydraulics. I'm based in Boston, just a few miles actually from where the American Revolution started. And I've spent the last decade working in data, primarily in the fields of education, healthcare, and genomics, and now CDN and security data. So it's been really interesting, my time so far at Hydraulics, to see the sharp rise in bot activity. Excited to share more about what we learned today.
And I'm Catherine. I'm the head of solutions engineering here at Hydraulics. I've spent my career in tech primarily in data, big data, in a variety of roles. So solutions engineering, actual engineering. I did product for a little while, but I really love being in the solutions engineering space where we're working with customers all the time and trying to help them solve their very real problems.
Wonderful. Thank you both. Srini, did you want to tell us a little bit about why Hydraulics commissioned this research and what problem it was designed to answer?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do that. So we basically work with some of the largest companies in the world, and we've had a front row seat into the financial, strategic, and customer impact that bots in general, but also AI bots in particular, are having in these organizations. We saw firsthand just the different language the teams were using to talk about bots, and even honestly, the different varying levels of sophistication and readiness in general. So naturally, we wanted to understand how our own experiences and exposure really translated to the broader market and what else was going on in the industry. So we commissioned this research, which eventually resulted in 300 responses from enterprise leaders, as Max mentioned, and really representing Fortune 100 scale high traffic environments. So they're really also seeing and witnessing the challenges that we saw and the implications that bots are having at a very, very large scale.
Well, I think it's on that note, it's time for us to dive in. So the first finding in the research is a striking disconnect between what organizations think their bot exposure looks like and what external benchmarks actually show. Srini, can you walk us through what we found here and why do you think that gap exists?
Yeah, it's a great point and a great question. It's super interesting because what we're seeing here is that basically 82% of organizations are actually really far off in terms of what they think the volume of AI bot traffic really is. So the true number is 51%, which basically means that majority of web traffic is from automated bots. And on the flip side, what we're actually seeing in our survey respondents is that 82% of people thought it was less than 25%. And what you'll see in the final report is that actually only 1% of people even got our stat correctly at all. So it's a pretty interesting disconnect because it speaks to just, again, the level of preparedness that companies and teams have, and even just a lot of this has really been driven in the last few years with all these cutting edge generative AI technologies. And so bots have always been a part of the internet and a reality since day one. But the volume of it and the ease of use for anyone sitting at home or with with access to data centers in the cloud, it's never been easier to spin up bots that are going to kind of attack or even do more mild things potentially across all the web properties that the companies are actually running. So I think it just speaks to what we've seen even with our own customers, which is this is catching people off guard in ways that are, I think, very difficult to understand. And honestly, a lot of companies also don't have the visibility to accurately answer this question, even for their own web properties, forget kind of the entire kind of internet at large.
Yeah, and I would add that we've been hearing not people saying like, hey, I want to understand bots better necessarily in language that's that clear that they're asking about bots. But because of the type of customers we have, a lot of them are looking at CDN data. So we have things like user agent, we can see exactly what requests are going through, or like in our customers' data, they can. And we help them with that data. And so a lot of the things that they were asking us really boiled down to, I want to understand how non-user traffic is impacting me. So, just a couple of examples, not naming any names, there has been a reaction of like, oh, well, all bots are bad. Okay, well, if we say all bots are bad, we had one customer that was blocking a bunch of bots, and it cost them a significant amount of money because they were blocking bots that were actually there to facilitate purchases. So it's, coming through like a search website. And so by blocking that, they actually cut off a significant amount of revenue that they could have had access to. So having that visibility to understand that was really important. In the other direction, we see we had a different customer who had they could see the bots that were coming through, but they didn't really have a real understanding of how that was impacting their overall infrastructure. So they were asking questions like, why is so many of the requests, why are they going to my origin and not being served off of the edge? And it was because the bots that were looking at their website were actually making a very unique request every time that was putting burden on their backend infrastructure that should have been, really managed by the CDN in front of it. And so it has not just a very real impact on how their business is reacting and all of that, but like the cost of their infrastructure and being able to support those types of requests, and then understanding how do I route those things so that it is optimal for, both my business and what I'm trying to accomplish, but also how my overall infrastructure is being impacted.
Catherine, I want to stay with you for our next question. But before I do, I just wanted to quickly call out to our audience. We have a poll in the polls tab. We would love to hear from you. So please take a second and go ahead and check that out. But Catherine, getting back to our question here, the report found that confidence exceeds capability to detect bot activity. This is a central finding of the report and the sharpest argument for why confidence is a liability right now. When you see that number, what's your read on what's actually happening inside these organizations? Is this a tool problem, an infrastructure problem, or perhaps something else?
I think it's a combination of several things. Things have changed really rapidly on us. The bots have been around for a while, but especially in the last year, the profile of what they're doing has really dramatically changed, where you have more individual users doing, bot types of things as well. But the other side of it is that it's driving a phenomenal amount of traffic, right? So we see this every few years in tech where like something happens that just really increases the amount of traffic or the amount of data that things are generating. And this has always been a problem in observability, not just with bots, but you're either looking at, it's going to be really expensive to gather it and hard to scale. So especially when you get something that isn't necessarily a DDoS attack, but looks and feels like a DDoS attack because you get a bunch of requests at once. So being able to scale up quickly enough to handle to understand what all those requests are, capture them so that you can react to them. If you are able to do that, it typically costs quite a bit. And so customers in that case start looking at, okay, well, can I sample? Can I maybe just pull out the things that were failures and sample the successes that are going through? Or they start throwing data away. And so a lot of, and again, not necessarily strictly bots, but for observability, as that data keeps getting larger, the timeline of what people can store historically keeps shrinking because they're trying to adjust their cost that they're paying for those things against what they actually need to do. And so, especially for malicious actors, they're typically very aware of those timelines. So like in the security space, there's typically like a 90-day retention window. Folks that are doing attacks know that. So they're able to time things based on that retention. So you're always making this compromise. And it's honestly very hard to scale up to take an overwhelming surge in traffic really quickly. And that can actually look even like a live event. Like if you have a customer that does a lot of streaming, like everybody turns on, a big game or a big concert on TV around the same time. So it's a similar type of problem, but it really boils down to how complex is it to manage? Can I scale up? How much can I reasonably retain? And how do I manage that with my cost? And especially with observability, sometimes it gets complicated in deciding how much to spend versus the benefit that you're getting out of it. And to say like, I'm going to collect this data, but I don't really know what's in it, can become cost prohibitive really quickly. So it's important to have solutions that can scale and that you can manage and dial in your cost knobs really in a very fine-tuned sort of way.
Yeah, I think the other thing I'll add to that is, up until now, a lot of the ownership for the bot problem would often live in like one department. It was often very security focused, like information security, kind of CIO, CISOs kind of spend a lot of time thinking about bots in the past. But I think now with all the different bots that are out there, it's, I think, become more of an organizational strategic challenge in general. It's not kind of just for one team to kind of think about and kind of have a very reactive, defensive strategy. I think, the example we gave earlier with a search engine not being able to reach a site, that is kind of not really the same type of problem as a traditional malicious actor or credential stuffing or other kinds of things that people historically have worried about. And so I think this is really a big shift because of all the changes that have happened in the tech industry, because of these generative AI tools and all the trends. You do have to kind of level up from just one team kind of struggling to kind of wrangle everything and use the existing tools that are out there with the limitations that Catherine mentioned. But it needs to shift to a more strategic org level effort, really. There's not really a lot of companies that have a chief bot officer, right? So I think that really just speaks to the fact that people are still underestimating the scale of the problem, and even the impact that it has to the business can be very multifaceted, very interdepartmental. And I think people are still kind of maybe hanging on to the old way, but we're in a new era now, and you kind of need a different approach, different tools. So yeah.
I just want to put a finer point on that, just emphasizing something Srini just said, is that like this typically might have fallen into the security realm, but for the search engine piece of it, like that very much fell in the application business side of things, because it wasn't a security concern. It was really, do all of our customers, and in this case, that bot was effectively a customer and driving customer engagement, how is that impacting the overall business? And so where I think traditionally we would think of this very much as a security concern, it really is a concern of the full business at this point.
And of course, the threats bots impose are not new, but AI has changed how they're executed and amplified. Srini, what does the data tell us about how organizations are keeping up with that pace of change?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think it's, what we're seeing is that AI, does amplify all the old threats that were still there, and now it's kind of even easier for bad actors to carry them out. So whether that's kind of a rise in credential stuffing attacks, as you can see there, DDoS attacks, right? Even if you kind of get some temporary, if you have an agent, someone built an agent that gets kind of temporarily blocked or limited in some way, you can kind of build agents that are much more adaptive and can get around certain limitations. And then scraping, I mean, the whole AI industry has been built on data scraping. And so 40% increase definitely seems like, it's probably kind of what I would expect. And I think what's really interesting is just that it's just never, what you have is kind of a little bit of an unequal battle. And the same thing has happened in security for a while, where when you have one side has new access to new tools and techniques, it's totally kind of a cat and mouse game where you have one side getting more sophisticated avenues to breaking through barriers. The other side is maybe still stuck in kind of doing things the way that they've always been used to. And so you kind of need to bring the arms on one side over to the other side as well. Like, you need a more flexible approach. You need to keep the data around so you actually know that, at the 91st day, someone isn't kind of coming back because they know that you used to have a specific limitation. So if the agents and if the bad actors out there are getting more adaptive because of AI, obviously it's just as important for enterprises that are defending themselves from those tools and those actors to kind of take a similar approach as well. And if you don't have that kind of long-term visibility, if you're throwing away logs, it's really just difficult to continue to build and enforce the strategy that you've built as a company, basically, if your tools are just kind of very reactive and short-term focused. So I think AI, it just makes the problem even more challenging. And I think the other side has to kind of catch up as well.
Yeah, and just to add on to, Srini mentioned the word adaptive a few times. It's not as simple as just looking at a request and being like, oh, that's a bot. It's looking at the pattern of behavior of to what something's doing. So, for example, we had one customer where the behavior that we saw, it was a retail site, was that the bot was basically adding things to a shopping cart to get pricing, but was adding things in a way that a human user typically wouldn't do. So it was a product that comes in a large variety of sizes, and they were adding every single size into the shopping cart to try to figure out pricing. And so it's not just like looking at a request and being like, oh, that's, a bot from Google or Bing or whatever it is. It's also looking at the pattern of behavior and understanding, because, a malicious bot's not going to be like, hey, here I am. It's looking at what is the behavior that's happening here, and how do you distinguish that from a human actor that's actually trying to do business with your company. That's where it gets really complex, and it starts becoming really important to have an adaptive strategy around that. Not just I'm, blocking things that look like this and not blocking things that look like that, but looking at the overall behavior of what something or someone is doing to understand, like, is this going to have a business impact to me or not?
Well, let's talk about where the research connects directly to infrastructure decisions. Catherine, I'd like to make it concrete. The report recommends organizations amp up speed, broaden retention, and reduce telemetry noise. What does that actually mean in practice for an engineering team trying to get ahead of this?
Honestly, it really means that you need all of the data. You can't work from a subset. And I would say that, we talk, AI has really changed the game, but it's changed it in two ways. So one, if you're trying to build models, you really truly need all of the data to make an accurate representation, which is very different than, historically as an industry, we throw out a lot of data. We believe that there's a timeline associated with it. A lot of times there is, and that after a certain time horizon, that data is not useful anymore. So if you're trying to build a model, it's important, but also if you're hooking an LLM up to your data to help you make decisions. So, let's say you have MCP, so you're doing some natural language query. If it doesn't have all of the data there, you simply can't act with confidence. So even if you have detection tools in place and all of these other things, most of the data pipelines today and traditional observability tools that have been around for a while just don't scale in that way. So, and not just scale for the ingest, but also for the retention and to have it available for a long period of time. Sometimes, patterns take more than 3 months to develop just because of how, different actors are behaving in that environment. And so it's really important to have the full view of the data. And we hear, a lot of customers will say things like, well, we don't really care about all the successes. What we really care about are just the failures, and we care about some of the successes. So we'll just, we'll sample successes at 5%. We'll just grab like 5% of those things. That's not really giving you the full picture, because, like, back to the example I was just talking about, all of those requests were successes, but they were successes that had malicious behavior associated with them. So it's really being able to grab all the data, keep all the data, and be able to query it in a way that where the cost is balanced with the risk that's associated to those bots to your company. And, I'm not saying like you need to spend gobs of money to do this. It's balancing the risk with the cost that it's going to cost you to address it.
Yeah, and just to kind of add on that a little bit more, I mean, in a previous life, I spent a bunch of time training machine learning models on historical data, and both having not enough kind of full fidelity data, but also not having historical data, both had its own issues. And it's just so interesting because in any other domain that people truly value and think is super important, you can get full fidelity data for a very long time. If you look at the financial industry, they're really good at keeping data around as long as possible, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I really think that this is something in the telemetry space that has just become a fact of life, that a lot of vendors just aren't able to offer that type of functionality at a price that people are happy to pay, and they are getting the value that they hope to. So I think it's great now that we have options that don't require you to throw things away, throw data away, just to try to maintain some level of budget control, but you're kind of giving up a lot of the useful insights. And to kind of what Catherine mentioned as well, you also, with these AI tools, being able to query data, it's really easy to get a wrong picture with limited data as well. And so if you're throwing away information, it's just going to be really challenging to build that adaptive strategy that aligns with what the organization is doing. And lastly, the hope is, as an enterprise, you really want to have these data feeds kind of compounding your strategy and your advantages over time. And so if you're kind of adding new sources of data that could give you signal, that could help you better inform and enforce a strategy, but you're kind of hampering yourself with the full fidelity of it, with having the history there, it's just kind of a weak foundation for truly adapting to what attackers and malicious folks are doing. And I think it's just not a great foundation for really thriving in this new age that we kind of find ourselves in.
Yeah, and I just want to add one more point onto that. In a prior job, I was helping to build models for detecting patterns in human language. One of the things that we were trying to detect was somebody posing a danger to themselves. It was really hard to find examples of that thing in order to train a model to detect it accurately. That translates into what we're talking about with bots and security, because for something that's rare that's happening. So especially someone like attacks typically aren't like a big overwhelming thing. It's typically, people that are trying to not be detected and extract data or something out of a company. If you're not keeping all of that, you don't have a way to model it. So those really rare events actually become really important to keep in order to reflect reality. If you're not, if you have a limited time window that you can keep it, you can't really look back and come up with, a model or even identify the trend of some of these rare events happening in an accurate type of way.
Absolutely. Srini, I'm going to pass it back to you here. If people have found this research of interest and wanted to speak more with the hydraulics team, how could they go about that?
Yeah, good question. I mean, if you found this research interesting, you want to learn more, you can book a 30-minute conversation with the hydraulics team, and we're happy to kind of talk through what the data means for your specific environment, map out a clear next step. So please feel free to book kind of a custom briefing with us. We'll take a look at all the findings that are most relevant for kind of your traffic and your use case, and kind of go from there.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank you both, first of all. This was a really helpful look at the state of enterprise bot readiness and the visibility challenges teams are facing as bot traffic continues to grow. I do want to move into the Q&A portion of the session now. As a reminder to everyone, you can submit your questions using the Q&A panel, and we'll get to as many as we can. But let's go ahead and jump into a few of the questions from the audience. So whomever wants to take this first one. Is the visibility gap really that wide? Are organizations genuinely unaware of how much of their traffic is automated, or is it more that they know and just aren't measuring it well?
I would say it's a little bit of both. It's having the right tools in place, but then also being able to do that in a way where you can grab all the data in a cost-effective way. So you can only operate on the information you have, right? So if the information you have is a subset of reality, you're making decisions based on a subset of reality. What we're seeing more and more is folks want all the data, especially when you're talking to security folks. Like they know that there are things in the data that they can't identify today. And so they're looking at that data with tools that are executing right now. But when they identify a new pattern, they want to be able to look back and identify like, okay, well, how has this been impacting me for a longer period of time? So I've said this a few times, it's really important to find a cost-effective way to do that. The balance is with the risk that your business faces from those types of requests and attacks.
Yeah, just to add on to that, completely agree. I mean, I think it's just difficult to really get an accurate picture if you're not storing everything, and if you have tools that aren't able to kind of feed the right insights from that data as well. So I think just kind of further driving home the point that it's really difficult to choose the right tool. It's really important that you choose the right tool, and it's kind of important that you are able to kind of maintain that picture over time. Otherwise, we've seen a lot of enterprises, and clearly even the respondents here, struggle to be able to answer these types of basic questions.
Speaking of tools, that leads us right to our next question. What tools should organizations actually be using to see bot traffic clearly, and where do most pipelines fall short?
I can start with this one. Srini, feel free to jump in. A lot of it is connecting what's coming in from the outside into what's happening internally. So, there's an application, especially something that's externally facing, is typically going to have a CDN sitting in front of it where all the requests are being captured there. And typically, those data sets are not looked at as a single unit. And really what you need is the ability to look from the requests that you originally got at the very edge of your enterprise all the way through to how it impacted back-end systems or what was even touched. So having a way to look at all of that as a single set. So from the external request into what network traffic did that cause for you internally, what systems were touched, like being able to look at that quickly is both one, a data structure problem, but then also having modern tools that allow you to do more types of natural language query, so that like in a typical type of query in that scenario, you're thinking through like, okay, which data sets do I need to look at? What fields matter here? Versus, having a way to do natural language query where you're not having to think of those things. You're getting assistance from an LLM or something else in order to help you do that. So to me, it's really both of those things.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think it's from kind of a framework standpoint, it's bringing the right data feeds together into a single place, and then adding on specific kind of knowledge and context around the bots, so that you're going from kind of raw telemetry, which is very simple, it's kind of individual requests and things like that, but actually enriching that information and all that log data, so you can understand the key bot traffic patterns and the types of bots. And these bots are also trying to hide what they're doing a lot of the times, right? That's kind of their goal in many ways. So how do you kind of have a product or a vendor that can kind of build those signatures that your business cares about? Shameless plug, it is something that we also offer at Hydraulics, but I think there are other tools out there. So I think the more general approach is kind of what I kind of wanted to mention, yeah.
Someone in the audience asks, the 56-point gap between confidence and actual capability is the most striking finding in this research. What does that overconfidence actually cost an organization in practice?
You want to take that one, Srini?
Sure, I'll take this one. Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think in practice, I'll kind of go back a little bit to the example we mentioned earlier about a search engine not being able to reach the important properties of one of our customers. And I think that sounds very kind of simple, but you can imagine there are many businesses that rely heavily on Google ads, Bing ads, and just in general the search engine, and now this new AI engine optimization ecosystem to drive top of funnel. And there's, in some of these organizations, there may be hundreds of people working on just bringing new potential customers to your web properties, to make them aware of your product offerings. And a small rule change somewhere in a security tool somewhere that shuts down all of that you may not even be aware of for weeks, or in our customers' cases, a few months. I think that's just kind of really points to the fact that this is really a strategic cross-department organizational challenge. It's not just something that one team should be thinking about. And I think the orgs that we've seen really level up, unfortunately, have had to go through that journey themselves. They've been hit with some problem, and they saw the issue, they saw the impact that it had. And that's when they kind of brought all their organizations, all their teams internally to kind of align on a more unified, proactive strategy. But we're hoping that we're hoping that most orgs don't have to feel that pain, if possible, right? If you can get ahead of the problem, then I think you'll be ahead of the situation.
If over half of respondents expect CX degradation from bots in the next year, who owns this problem?
That's a revenue problem in my mind. My team at Hydraulics, we're effectively the customer advocates. We're there to make sure that our customers are having a great experience. They're able to get to what they need. And same's true of anyone who has a web presence. And so, like, if you just think back to, before bots, people are really worried about how fast their website responded, because if you don't respond quickly, any of us, like if you're trying to buy a plane ticket, for example, and you click on website and it doesn't load, you just go to the next one. Right. And so if you're having something that's impacting your customers in that way, it will impact your revenue simply because of people being impatient. And so it's whoever owns customer experience in your organization really has to be a key stakeholder in these types of decisions and deciding, like, okay, how how do we determine good, bad bots, good, bad behavior? They have to be a key stakeholder in that.
I've had some great questions, and I think that, again, this is another good one to follow that up with. Why aren't weekly updates to detection rules good enough anymore?
You grab that one, Srini?
Sure, I can take that one. Weekly updates. Yeah, I think there's two levels to it. There's kind of, I sense that part of the intent behind the question is kind of, why isn't a just kind of a simplistic kind of week over week strategy enough? I think there's two levels to it. One is just like, what is the actual time period that you're looking at the data? If it's just a few weeks or a few months, then I think you have all the same problems that we've kind of covered already. Then there's the other problem of kind of how quickly are you adapting? How quickly is the organization adapting? And I think, because of all the tools that are out there, because of all these AI bots, I think the ecosystem is just changing too quickly to kind of look at a report once a week and kind of sit there and think about what should we change. I think the internet operates in real time, and agentic bots are also taking the same approach. So it's difficult to have a weekly review and a weekly update cadence when these agents and these bots are adapting just much more rapidly than that.
Absolutely. And it looks like we may have lost Catherine. We do have time for maybe one more question. So I'll go ahead and I'll ask you, Srini, if
Sure.
if you feel like kind of fielding it. The gray zone between legitimate and malicious bot traffic seems like the hardest part to govern. How are teams making enforcement decisions when intent isn't clear?
That is a really great question. And I think that really cuts to the core of the challenge that a lot of organizations are facing. I think there's two parts to this answer. I think one is, do you actually have a bot management strategy, right? I think that's, as we've seen from the study that we commissioned, most people don't. Most organizations actually don't have that strategy, right? They either have a kind of reactive approach, they know what bad looks like, and maybe they know what good looks like. But I think what the gray zone looks like is also a little bit specific to the organization, and which is why that strategy is also really important. Because, for a very concrete example, if someone goes to Claude or ChatGPT and asks about shoes or cars, and they get recommended a product and they end up on your website, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Is that, that's in the gray zone, right? It really depends on your business. It really depends on if you want to accept traffic from those type of LLM products. We've seen the whole range from organizations just saying no, we don't want any traffic at all from those types of services, from others trying to lean in more to it, to a third category of saying, we're going to let a certain type of traffic pattern in, and the other type, we're not going to allow. So I think the unfortunate reality is that most organizations actually don't have a cohesive strategy. And if you do, I think that's really where you actually start to map out what's in the gray zone and make sense for it. And then two, I think you need the right tooling. So once you've figured out that you have this problem and it's an organization executive level problem, a strategic problem, then I think that's what drives the investment internally into the right tools and the right workflows, so that when there's a new threat or a new type of bot and you're not sure where it falls in, you're able to have that conversation with the right people internally, because you have the strategy, you have the tooling, you bring them together and you bring the right people together, and you kind of map out that gray zone over time.
Absolutely. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. And again, if we didn't get to your question, the hydraulics team will definitely follow up after the session. But I do want to thank you, Srini and Catherine, for walking us through the findings from the State of AI Bots 2026. Today's discussion has definitely made it clear that the bot readiness gap is not just about whether teams have detection tools in place. It's about whether they have the visibility, log infrastructure, and operational strategy needed to understand bot activity at scale and respond with of confidence. Before leaving today, be sure to download your copy of the 2026 AI Bots Risk, Readiness, and Governance Report from the Resources tab. And lastly, I just want to thank everyone who joined us today. Keep an eye on your inbox for that on-demand recording, and we hope to see you at a future D-Zone webinar. Thanks, everyone.